Captain Minho stared at the warning lights flashing across his ship's control panel. The solar storm had hit them harder than expected, and now the Harmony's edge was drifting through space like a broken toy. Red alerts blinked everywhere, telling him what he already knew. They were in serious trouble. "Hyasung, how bad is it?" Minho asked his chief engineer. The young woman wiped sweat from her forehead as she worked under a smoking console. "The navigation system is completely fried. We're flying blind, Captain, and we're definitely not where we're supposed to be." Ji-won, the ship's medical officer, looked up from treating a crew member's burns. "At least no one died when that power surge hit. We got lucky there." Lucky. Minho almost laughed at the word. They were supposed to be on a simple diplomatic mission to meet with the Velhari Empire. The humans wanted to establish trade relations, maybe learn something from the advanced alien civilization. Instead, they were lost in space with broken systems. "Captain," called Tai-hyun from the communications station. "I'm picking up multiple ships approaching. They're big and they're definitely not human." Through the main viewing window, Minho watched as massive crystalline ships appeared around them. They looked like floating cathedrals made of living crystal. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Velhari had found them. "Soman, try to establish communication," Minho ordered. "Let them know we're not here to cause trouble." "I'm trying, sir, but they're not responding to our standard signals." The answer came in the form of a blue energy beam that wrapped around their ship like a rope. The Harmony's edge was being pulled toward the largest Velhari vessel, whether they liked it or not. An hour later, Minho and his 4 crew members stood in chains before the Velhari court. The throne room was a wonder of crystal architecture that seemed to grow from the floor itself. Light moved through the walls in patterns that hurt human eyes to follow. The Velhari themselves were just as alien and beautiful as their ships. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that shifted between silver and blue like liquid metal. Their eyes were large and bright, like stars trapped in their faces. They moved with perfect grace, as if every gesture had been practiced for centuries. "So these are the humans," said a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "How disappointingly small they are." Laughter rippled through the court, a sound like crystal bells ringing. Minho kept his head high, refusing to show fear even though his heart was racing. "We are explorers and diplomats," Minho said clearly. "We came seeking friendship between our peoples." More laughter, but this time it was crueler. A tall Velhari with golden markings on his forehead stepped forward. This had to be someone important. "I am Lord Kethrian of the First House," the alien announced. "You dare speak of friendship? You primitive creatures have nothing to offer us. Your technology is laughable. Your lifespan's barely a blink of our eyes. What possible use could we have for humans?" Minho felt his crew tense beside him, but he remained calm. He had expected this reaction. The Velhari were known to consider themselves superior to all other species. "You're right," Minho said, surprising everyone in the room. "We don't have your crystal technology or your long lives, but we have something else." "And what is that?" Lord Kethrian asked, his voice dripping with amusement. "We have the ability to survive anything and keep moving forward. We've faced ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed us, and we're still here. We don't give up, and we don't abandon each other. When everything falls apart, we rebuild it better than before." The court fell silent. Minho continued, his voice growing stronger. "We have farmers who became doctors when their crops failed. We have soldiers who became teachers when wars ended. We have children who grew up in ruins and built cities. Every human carries the strength of all the humans who came before them. That's what we offer, not just trade goods, but the knowledge of how to survive anything." "Meaningless words," Lord Kethrian scoffed. "Survival is for the weak who cannot build proper civilizations." But Minho noticed that one figure in the court had not laughed. She stood near the throne, wearing robes that seemed to be made of starlight itself. Her skin was paler than the others, shifting between silver and pearl white. When their eyes met, Minho saw something unexpected. Curiosity. "Princess Nara," Lord Kethrian said, turning to the figure. "Surely you agree that these creatures are fit only for labor?" Princess Nara stepped forward, and the entire court watched her with attention. When she spoke, her voice was softer than the others. like water flowing over stones. "They speak strangely," she said slowly. "They do not boast of weapons or demand respect through fear. This captain speaks of strength through helping others." "A weakness they mistake for strength," Lord Kethrian replied quickly. "Princess, as your intended husband, I advise you not to waste thoughts on these animals." But Princess Nara continued to study Minho with those bright star-like eyes. She seemed to be trying to understand something that didn't fit into her world view. The Velari Emperor finally spoke from his crystal throne. His voice filled the entire room like thunder. "These humans will work in the crystal mines until they die. Perhaps hard labor will teach them proper humility." As guards moved to take them away, Princess Nara suddenly spoke again. "Wait!" The entire court froze. Even the Emperor looked surprised. "I wish to observe these humans more closely," she said. "If they are truly as primitive as we believe, then watching them work will prove our superiority. But if they possess some quality we do not understand, then knowledge of it could benefit the Empire." Lord Kethrian's eyes flashed with anger. "Princess, surely you do not believe these creatures have anything to teach us?" "I believe in thorough study of all things," Princess Nara replied calmly. "Is this not the way of the Velhari?" The Emperor considered this for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. The princess may observe the humans at work. Perhaps she will learn something about the value of proper breeding and civilization." As the guards led them away, Minho glanced back at Princess Nara. She was still watching him with those curious eyes, and he had the strange feeling that something important had just happened, though he couldn't say what. The crystal mines awaited them. But somehow Minho felt that their real journey was just beginning. The crystal mines of Veltar were both beautiful and terrible. Massive formations of living crystal grew from the cavern walls, pulsing with their own inner light. The Velhari used these crystals to power their advanced technology, but harvesting them required dangerous work in deep tunnels where cave-ins happened regularly. Minho swung his heavy mining tool, breaking away chunks of crystal while sweat dripped down his face. The work was exhausting, and the Velhari guards showed no mercy to workers who slowed down. Around him, other prisoners worked in silence, some human, but mostly Velhari from the lower castes who had committed various crimes. "At least the crystals are pretty," Hyesung whispered as she worked beside him. Even in this terrible place, she tried to find something positive. "Save your breath," muttered a Velhari worker nearby. "The guards will beat you for talking." But the guards weren't paying attention right now. They were all looking toward the mine entrance where a figure in starlight robes was descending into the tunnels. Princess Nara had come to observe, just as she had promised. She walked through the mine slowly, studying everything with those bright eyes. When she reached the human section, she stopped and watched them work. Minho noticed she didn't look disgusted or superior like the other Velhari. Instead, she seemed genuinely curious about what she was seeing. "You," she said, pointing at Jiwon. "You were treating the injured Velhari worker." "Why?" Jiwon looked up from where she was bandaging another prisoner's cut hand. "Because he was hurt, Your Highness. Injured people need help regardless of who they are." "But he is not your species, not even your friend. Why waste your energy on him?" "It's not wasted," Jiwon replied gently. "When we help others, we make the world a little bit better for everyone." Princess Nara stared at her for a long moment, then moved on. She stopped next to Hyesung, who was explaining something to a young Velhari prisoner struggling with his mining tool. "And you?" the princess asked. "Why do you teach him? He will only compete with you for food rations." Hyesung smiled despite her exhaustion. "Your Highness, where I come from, we have vast oceans, water that stretches beyond the horizon. When you drop a stone into water, it creates ripples that spread outward, touching everything. Kindness works the same way. When I help him, maybe he'll help someone else later." "Oceans?" Princess Nara's eyes widened. "Water that flows freely? We have no such thing on our worlds." "They're beautiful," Hyesung said, her voice growing warm with memory. "Blue and green and always moving, full of life. Sometimes storms make them dangerous, but they always calm down again. They're powerful enough to carve mountains, but gentle enough that children can play in them." For the rest of that day, Princess Nara stayed in the mines, watching and asking questions. She saw how the humans shared their small food portions with weaker prisoners. She watched Minho organize work groups that helped everyone finish their quotas instead of competing against each other. She observed how they told stories and sang quiet songs to keep their spirits up, even in this dark place. The princess began visiting regularly, always asking questions that seemed strange to the guards but made perfect sense to the humans. She wanted to understand why they helped their competitors, why they shared resources when they had so little, why they seemed to grow stronger together instead of weaker. "Captain Minho," she said one day, sitting beside him during the short rest period. "Your people have been here for weeks, yet you do not seem defeated. How is this possible?" Minho looked at her thoughtfully. "Your Highness, has anyone ever told you about stars?" "Of course. They are distant suns." "Yes, but here's the thing about stars. They seem small and weak when you look at them alone. But when you put many stars together, they light up the entire sky. Humans are like that. One person might break under pressure, but when we support each other, we become something stronger." That night, disaster struck. A section of the mine collapsed, trapping both human and Velhari workers under tons of crystal and rock. The guards immediately wrote off the trapped prisoners as lost and began planning to seal the tunnel. But Minho refused to give up. "We can save them," he told the guards. "Give us tools and time." "Impossible," the guard captain replied. "Too dangerous. We will seal it and move on." "Then you'll have to kill us first," Minho said quietly. Behind him, his crew and several Velhari prisoners stood together. "We're not leaving them to die." Princess Nara, who had been visiting when the collapse happened, stepped forward. "Wait," she commanded. "Let them try." For the next 18 hours, Minho led a desperate rescue operation. He organized teams to dig carefully through the rubble while others provided support. Hyesung figured out how to shore up weak points in the tunnel. Jiwon set up a medical station to treat injuries. Taehyun and Soman coordinated the rescue teams. The amazing thing was how the Velhari prisoners began helping. They had watched the humans for weeks and slowly learned to work together instead of competing. When the rescue teams finally broke through to the trapped workers, they found both humans and Velhari alive. As the rescued prisoners were brought out, Princess Nara watched with wonder. Everyone was helping everyone else, regardless of species or caste. The lowest Velhari worker was carrying an injured guard on his back. A human was sharing her water with a Velhari who had previously been cruel to her. "I understand now, Princess," Nara whispered to Minho as the last survivor was brought out safely. "This is what you meant about strength. You do not gain power over others, you give power to others." That night, Princess Nara made a decision that would change everything. She went to Lord Kethrion's chambers, where he was waiting for her with wedding plans spread across a crystal table. "My dear princess," he said warmly, "I trust this foolish experiment with the humans has shown you their true nature, weak and chaotic, yes?" "No," Princess Nara said quietly. "It has shown me something else entirely." Kethrion's expression darkened. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I have been living my entire life wrong. I have believed that worth comes from birth, that leadership means commanding others to obey. But these humans have shown me that true leadership means helping others become strong. True worth must be earned through actions, not inherited through blood." "Ridiculous!" Kethrion slammed his hand on the table. "You are a princess of the third house. You are destined to rule. These primitive ideas will destroy everything our civilization has built." "Then perhaps," Princess Nara said, looking at him, "with new eyes, our civilization needs to change." The argument that followed could be heard throughout the royal quarters. It ended with Lord Kethrion making an ultimatum. Either Princess Nara would marry him immediately and forget these dangerous ideas, or he would have all the humans executed as a threat to Velhari society. Princess Nara stood in her chambers afterward, looking out at the stars through her crystal window. She thought about oceans she had never seen, about the ripples that kindness creates, about stars that shine brighter when they stand together. Then she made a choice that no Velhari princess had ever made before. The next morning, She walked into the imperial court wearing simple workers' clothes instead of her royal robes. Before the assembled nobles and her own father, the emperor, she spoke words that sent shockwaves through the empire. "I renounce my royal status," she announced. "I ask to serve as apprentice to Captain Minho so that I may learn what true leadership means." The court erupted in chaos, but Princess Nara stood calmly in the center of it all, finally free to become who she was meant to be. The news of Princess Nara's renunciation spread through the Velhari Empire like wildfire. In crystal palaces and worker districts alike, people gathered to whisper about the impossible thing that had happened. A royal had given up everything to learn from humans. Some called her insane. Others whispered that she had been infected by some human disease of the mind. But in the lowest levels of Velhari society, in the places where workers struggled and lower castes served their betters, people began to ask a different question. What if she was right? Minho found himself in an impossible situation. Princess Nara had approached him in the mines, still wearing her simple worker's clothes, asking him to teach her. "I can't accept you as an apprentice," he told her firmly. "You've already sacrificed. Too much. Go back to your family, princess. Make peace with them." "I am no longer a princess," she replied calmly. "My name is simply Nara now, and I will not go back to a life of inherited privilege while others suffer." "But what about your people? Your responsibilities?" Nara's eyes, still bright as stars, but now filled with determination, met his. "My responsibility is to become worthy of leadership, not to accept it as a birthright. Will you help me earn that worthiness?" Before Minho could answer, urgent shouts echoed through the mine tunnels. Taehyun came running with news that changed everything. "Captain, there's some kind of uprising in the lower city. The workers are demanding fair treatment, and they're using human ideas about cooperation. The guards don't know how to handle it. Because the workers aren't fighting, they're just refusing to compete against each other." Word came quickly that similar movements were starting on other Velhari worlds. Princess Nara's dramatic gesture had inspired something the Empire had never seen before. Lower caste Velhari working together instead of trying to climb over each other for better positions. Lord Kethrian arrived at the mines with a battalion of Imperial guards, his face twisted with rage. "You see what your human ideas have caused?" he shouted at Nara. "Chaos! Disorder! The natural order crumbling!" "I see people discovering they have worth," Nara replied without fear. "I see them learning they don't have to accept suffering as their destiny." "Enough!" Kethrian gestured to his guards. "Arrest all the humans. Execute them publicly. Maybe that will end this madness." But as the guards moved forward, something unexpected happened. The Velhari miners stepped between the humans and the soldiers. They were joined by workers from other sections, then by some of the lower caste guards themselves. "Stand down," Kethrian commanded, but his voice was no longer carrying the weight of absolute authority. An older Velhari miner, his skin scarred from years of dangerous work, spoke up. "Lord Kethrian, we have served faithfully all our lives. We have accepted that our children would inherit our positions just as we inherited them from our parents. But these humans have shown us something different. They have shown us that anyone can grow beyond where they started." "Treasonous nonsense." "Is it treason to want our children to have hope?" another worker asked. "Is it wrong to believe that kindness should be rewarded more than cruelty?" Minho realized that this moment was bigger than just him or his crew. The ideas they had shared were spreading, taking root in minds that had been ready for change. He made a decision. "Nara," he said, "if you truly want to learn about leadership, then this is your first lesson. A real leader doesn't command from behind guards. A real leader stands with the people and faces the consequences together." Nara nodded and stepped forward to address the crowd. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the cavern. "Friends," she said, using a word that made the nobility gasp in shock. "I am learning that leadership is not about being above others. It is about lifting others up. If you choose to follow this path of change, I will walk beside you. But I will not lead you from privilege. I will earn the right to guide you through service." Over the following days, something remarkable happened. A mixed group of humans and Velhari began working together to help the struggling workers in the lower city. Nara proved herself not through royal commands, but through actions. She organized food distribution to hungry families. She helped settle disputes between workers. She listened to problems and worked with others to find solutions. Minho watched, her carefully looking for signs that this was just an act or a temporary rebellion. But what he saw was genuine transformation. Nara was learning to lead through example, not authority. Her natural intelligence, combined with human principles of earned respect and mutual aid, made her remarkably effective. She's not pretending. Jiwon observed one evening as they watched Nara teaching young Velhari workers about cooperation instead of competition. She really has changed. More than changed, Hisung added. She's become something new, not quite human, but no longer limited by Velhari thinking either. The movement grew rapidly. Workers across multiple worlds began organizing using human-inspired principles. They didn't demand revolution or violence. Instead, they simply began treating each other with respect and working together for mutual benefit. The results were dramatic. Productivity increased, crime decreased, and for the first time in Velhari history, lower castes began to rise through merit rather than birth. But the traditional ruling class was not going to accept this transformation quietly. Lord Kethrian convinced the High Council that human influence was a disease that would destroy their perfect society. Imperial forces were mobilized to crush the New Harmony movement before it could spread further. The attack came without warning. Imperial ships surrounded the mining complex where Minho and Nara had been training their mixed group of followers. Crystal weapons began charging as soldiers prepared for assault. "We have to evacuate the civilians," Minho said, as alarms blared around them. "How?" Taehyun asked. "They've got us completely surrounded." Nara stood looking at the approaching ships, her mind working quickly. "The crystal formations," she said suddenly. "They extend deep underground and connect to natural cave systems. If we can guide people through them—" "That's incredibly dangerous," Hyesung warned. "One wrong turn and people could be lost forever." "But it's possible," Nara insisted. "I know these formations. I studied them all my life." Minho looked at her, remembering her words about wanting to stand beside him. This was the moment that would test everything she had learned. "Then we do it," he decided. Together. What followed was a desperate race against time. While Soman and Taehyun organized the evacuation, Minho and Nara led groups of civilians through dangerous crystal tunnels as Imperial forces closed in above them. In the darkness underground, with energy weapons firing overhead and crystal formations threatening to collapse around them, something important happened. When a section of tunnel began to crumble, threatening to crush a group of children, Nara didn't hesitate. She threw herself forward, using her own body to shield them from falling crystal. As rocks and debris rained down around them, Minho pulled her to safety. In that moment, as she lay injured but smiling because the children were unharmed, Minho finally understood what she had meant when she first said she wished to stand beside him. She wasn't asking to follow him or serve him. She was asking to be his equal partner in building something better than either of their species had achieved alone. "We make a good team," she whispered, as Jiwon treated her injuries. "Yes," Minho replied, "and we do." The evacuation succeeded, but the real war was just beginning. The civil war that erupted across the Velhari Empire was unlike anything in their history. It wasn't fought between armies seeking territory or resources. Instead, it was a battle between two completely different ideas about how people should live together. On one side stood the traditional forces led by Lord Kethrian and the High Council. They controlled most of the military, the established governments, and the wealthiest worlds. They fought to preserve a system where everyone knew their place from birth and never questioned it. On the other side was the New Harmony movement, led jointly by Minho and Nara. Their forces were smaller and less equipped, but they had something the traditionalists didn't understand: genuine unity between different species and castes working toward a common goal. The rebel fleet operated from captured and salvaged ships, constantly moving to avoid the superior Imperial forces. Nara had fully embraced human leadership principles, and it showed in everything she did. She ate the same food as the lowest soldier, shared the same risks as everyone else, and made decisions through discussion rather than decree. "Status report," Minho asked as he entered the command center of their flagship, a converted Velhari transport vessel. "Not good," Taehyun replied grimly. "Imperial forces have taken the crystalline sector. They're using our own people as shields, forcing workers to operate the crystal mines under guard. Any word from the outer colonies? Nara asked, studying the tactical display. Mixed news, Soman reported. 3 colonies have declared for New Harmony, but 2 others are too afraid of Imperial retaliation. And there's something else. Intelligence suggests Kethrian is planning something big. The something big became clear when intercepted communications revealed Kethrian's desperation plan. Unable to defeat the rebels through normal military action, he intended to destroy an entire civilian colony as a demonstration. The message was clear: surrender, or watch innocent people die. Nara stared at the intelligence report, her hands trembling slightly. Vel Nara Colony, 50,000 civilians, mostly families of miners and agricultural workers. He's going to murder them all just to force my surrender. It's a trap, Hisung warned. He knows you'll try to save them. He's probably counting on it. Of course it's a trap, Nara replied. But that doesn't change what we have to do. Minho recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same expression she'd worn when she threw herself forward to protect those children in the crystal tunnels. She had completely internalized the human principle that you don't abandon people just because it's dangerous or difficult to help them. The colony is too well defended, Taehyun pointed out. We'd lose half our fleet just getting close. Then we don't attack the colony, Minho said slowly, an idea forming. We attack the source. The plan they developed was audacious and desperately dangerous. While the main rebel fleet engaged Imperial forces in a series of diversionary battles, a small team would infiltrate Kethrian's flagship and stop the attack at its source. I should lead the infiltration team, Nara said immediately. Absolutely not, several voices replied at once. You're too important to the movement, Minho argued. If we lose you, everything falls apart. Nara's star-bright eyes flashed with determination. Captain Minho, you taught me that real leaders don't send others into dangers they won't face themselves. This is my responsibility. In the end, they went together, Minho, Nara, Taehyun, and Somin. It was a small team, but they had advantages that larger groups wouldn't. Nara's knowledge of Velhari systems and protocols, combined with human adaptability and unconventional thinking, gave them a chance. The infiltration began during the height of a massive space battle. While Rebel and Imperial fleets exchanged fire across multiple star systems, the small team used a captured maintenance vessel to approach Kethrian's command ship. The hardest part was getting past the security systems that Nara had helped design. During her royal days, I used to think these systems were perfect, she whispered as she worked to override them. But perfection means no room for change or growth. Humans taught me that adaptability is more valuable than perfection. They made their way through the ship's crystal corridors, avoiding patrols and security checkpoints. The plan was to reach the command center and stop the colony attack. But they were discovered just as they approached their goal. Alarms blared throughout the ship as Imperial guards surrounded them. Lord Kethrian appeared, flanked by his elite troops, his face twisted, with rage and something that might have been pain. My dear princess, he said, the title dripping with mockery. You have caused me so much trouble. Did you really think your pathetic human tricks would work against superior Velhari technology? I thought compassion and cooperation might work against hatred and fear. Nara replied calmly. And I was right. Look around you, Kethrian. How many of your own people have joined our cause? How many worlds have chosen hope over oppression? Temporary madness that will be cured once I demonstrate the consequences of rebellion, Kethrian snarled. He gestured toward a massive viewing screen showing Velnara Colony. Watch as your precious ideals burn. The weapons systems began charging for the attack that would annihilate 50,000 innocent lives. But Nara stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried through the command center's communication systems to every ship in Kethrian's fleet. I am Nara, formerly of the Third House, now proud to stand as equal among those who choose their own worth, she announced. Lord Kethrian, you claim to represent Velhari's superiority, but what I see is fear. You are so afraid of change that you would murder innocents to prevent it. Silence, Kethrian commanded, but Nara continued. Every Velhari listening to this knows the truth. Our people are capable of so much more than rigid hierarchies and inherited privilege. We can choose to grow, to learn, to become better than we were born to be. The humans didn't make us weak. They showed us how to become strong. Throughout the Imperial fleet, crews began to hesitate. Some had family members who had joined the New Harmony movement. Others had seen the positive changes happening on rebel-controlled worlds. The certainty that had held their society together for millennia was cracking. The confrontation in the command center became a battle of philosophies as much as weapons. Kethrian represented the fear of change, the comfort of predetermined roles, and the belief that some beings were inherently superior to others. Nara embodied growth, earned respect, and the radical idea that anyone could choose to become something greater. "You were supposed to be my wife!" Kethrian finally screamed, his composure completely breaking. "We were going to rule together, maintain the natural order, preserve our perfect civilization." "Perfect civilizations don't need to murder children to maintain themselves," Nara replied sadly. "And I could never have been happy in a marriage based on predetermined roles rather than chosen partnership." She looked at Minho, and he understood. They had both learned something important about leadership and partnership. It wasn't about one person commanding and another obeying. It was about two people choosing to work together as equals, combining their strengths to achieve something neither could accomplish alone. The battle for the command center was brief but decisive. When the smoke cleared, Kethrian was defeated, and the attack on the colony had been stopped. But more importantly, his public breakdown had been broadcast to the entire fleet. The facade of Velhari superiority had cracked, revealing the fear and insecurity beneath. One by one, Imperial ships began standing down. Captains who had been wavering finally chose the side of hope over oppression. The Civil War wasn't over, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. As Nara stood among the surrendering Imperial forces, no longer a princess, but something entirely new. She finally understood what she had been trying to say from the very beginning. She hadn't wanted to follow Minho or serve him. She had wanted to stand beside him as an equal partner in building something better than either of their species had achieved alone. And now, finally, she was ready to do exactly that. The end of the Civil War came not with a great battle, but with a choice that surprised everyone, including Nara herself. Lord Kethrian knelt in defeat on the crystal floor of his own command ship, surrounded by the wreckage of his failed dreams. His fleet had surrendered. His support among the nobility had crumbled, and his vision of maintaining Velhari superiority lay in ruins around him. "Kill me, then," he said bitterly, looking up at Nara. "Complete your human revolution with Velhari. Blood!" But Nara knelt down beside him, her actions shocking everyone present. "No," she said gently. "That's not what any of this was about." "What?" Kethrian stared at her in confusion. "You're afraid," Nara continued, her voice filled with understanding rather than anger. "You're terrified that change will destroy everything you've ever known or believed in. I understand that fear because I felt it too. But fear doesn't have to make us cruel." She stood and addressed not just Kethrian, but all the Imperial forces who were watching. "Everyone deserves the chance to choose who they want to become, even those who chose wrong in the past." This moment, broadcast across the entire Velhari Empire, marked the true victory of human principles over traditional thinking. Instead of revenge against those who had oppressed them, the New Harmony movement chose redemption and second chances. The months that followed were challenging in ways that war had not been. Fighting was simple compared to building a new society from the pieces of an old one. Minho and Nara worked together to establish a government that combined the best aspects of both species, Velhari efficiency and long-term planning with human adaptability and emphasis on individual worth. "The hardest part isn't the politics," Minho observed one evening as they reviewed proposals for the new constitution. "It's changing how people think about themselves." They were working in what had once been a royal palace, now converted into a community center where beings from all walks of life came to participate in their new democracy. Through the crystal windows, they could see Velhari and humans working together to build the first integrated colony. "My people spent thousands of years believing that worth was